We had an agreement. I'd buy my nephews gifts, and my brother would buy something for my son. I spent $1,800 on bikes, games, and clothes for his kids. On Christmas morning, my son opened one box. Inside was a plastic whistle. My brother just shrugged and said, "Sorry, money's tight." My son went quiet. I packed every single gift back into my truck, snapped a picture of the empty tree, and texted, "Deal's off." By noon, my brother was at my door, screaming. There are moments in life that just snap you awake, where you realize you've been playing a fool for years. For me, that moment wasn't some grand revelation. It was watching my 9-year-old son unwrap a dollar store whistle on Christmas morning, a cheap plastic symbol of everything wrong with my family and the betrayal I'd silently endured for far too long. Look, I'm Ben, 34, and I've always been the dependable one in my family. You know the type. The guy who remembers birthdays, knows everyone's shoe size, and is somehow expected to swoop in and fix every crisis. Ben will handle it, they'd say. My younger brother, Kyle, though, he's always been my polar opposite. The charming failure. The one who shows up late to Christmas, big grin on his face, no gifts in hand, and somehow, everyone just laughs it off. "Oh, that's just Kyle," they'd say, and I'd roll my eyes and just handle it. This past year, though, I truly believed we had found a system that could actually work. Back in September, Kyle and I made a deal. I'd take care of Christmas for his 2 boys, my nephews, and he'd handle my son, Max. Simple, right? Fair. And honestly, I was relieved. I love my nephews, but Christmas shopping for 3 kids can get ridiculously expensive, ridiculously fast. This way, we'd each focus on one set of gifts, and everyone would have a great morning. I took that deal seriously. I started early. I found out exactly what my nephews wanted. The bikes they'd been begging for, the video game they wouldn't stop talking about, new winter coats that actually fit. I didn't cut corners. I ended up spending nearly $1,800 because I wanted those boys to just light up when they ripped into those boxes. Max and I even wrapped everything together, and he was so excited, talking about seeing his cousins' faces. But a nagging feeling, a cold knot in my stomach, kept growing. Kyle never mentioned what he was getting from Max. Every time I'd casually bring it up, he'd brush me off with a laugh and say, "Oh, don't worry, man. I've got something special planned." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted this Christmas to be normal. Max is 9 now, old enough to notice when he's being left out. And after last year, when Kyle completely forgot to get him anything until New Year's Eve, I just couldn't stomach the idea of it happening again. Christmas morning arrived. We drove over to my parents' house, the truck loaded down with gifts. I even brought extra coffee because, well, I'm that guy. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and pine needles. Carols were playing softly in the background. It felt, for a moment, perfect. Max was practically bouncing with excitement as we all sat down around the tree. Kyle and his wife were already there with their boys, sipping cocoa like it was just another morning. We started handing out gifts. The boys tore into the boxes I'd spent months curating, and their faces lit up exactly the way I'd hoped. "Uncle Ben, this is awesome," one of them shouted, and for a second, my heart felt full. Then it was Max's turn. Kyle grinned, reached into a small bag, and handed Max a single, flat, badly wrapped box. My stomach dropped. Max peeled the paper off slowly, probably expecting a gift card or maybe a game disc. Instead, he held up a cheap neon green plastic whistle, the kind you'd find in a party favor bag at a dollar store. There was this awful, suffocating silence. Max stared at it like he didn't understand. My parents looked away. Kyle shrugged and, with a casualness that made my blood boil, said, "Sorry, man. Money's tight this year." My ears were ringing. Tight. He and his wife had just gotten back from a week-long ski trip in Colorado. They had matching jackets on right now that probably cost more than my car payment. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Max's little hands tightened around that whistle, and he just went quiet. Not crying, not complaining, just quiet. That was somehow worse than any tantrum. I stood up without a word, walked to the tree, and started picking up every single box I'd brought. The bikes, the games, the coats, all of it. My mom asked, "Ben, what are you doing?" But I didn't answer. I just loaded everything back into my truck while Kyle kept saying, "Whoa, chill. It's not that big a deal. Not that big a deal." When the last gift was gone, I snapped a quick photo of the empty tree, got in the truck, and sent a single text to the family group chat. Deals off. Max sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, the whistle still clutched in his hand. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up. Kyle had sent a wall of messages. Everything from, "You're overreacting," to "You ruined Christmas for everyone." Then came the call. "You better bring those gifts back right now," he barked. "My kids are crying." I didn't answer. I just set the phone down on the counter, made Max some hot chocolate, and tried to swallow the knot in my throat. It was almost noon when the pounding started on my front door. It rattled the whole house. Max flinched, looking at me wide-eyed like he wasn't sure if he was in trouble. I put a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "You're not in trouble, buddy." Then I stood there, listening to my brother shout from the porch, "Ben, open the door. You can't just take their gifts like some kind of psycho. You ruined Christmas. This is your fault." I didn't move. Not right away. My stomach was a tight knot, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Max was sitting at the kitchen counter now, blowing gently on his hot chocolate, silent as stone. When Kyle's yelling didn't stop, I finally walked to the door and cracked it just enough to look him in the eye. He was red-faced, practically foaming. "You're going to bring those gifts back," he said, not even bothering to say hello. "No," I said simply. That one word seemed to set him off. He threw his hands up, pacing back and forth on my porch like a man possessed. "You can't punish my kids for this." "I'm not punishing your kids," I said, my voice calm, but shaking a little from how hard I was holding myself together. "I'm done being taken advantage of. We had a deal, Kyle." I held up my end. "You didn't." He scoffed like I was being ridiculous. "It's not a big deal. It's just Christmas. You're being dramatic." Behind him, his wife appeared, arms crossed, wearing that expression that always made me feel like I was 12 years old again and in trouble. "This is really selfish of you, Ben," she said sharply. "You're teaching Max to hold grudges. He's going to grow up bitter if you act like this." Something about being accused of teaching my kid to be bitter when all I'd done was try to make sure he felt included made me feel this heavy, hot anger in my chest. "I'm teaching my son that he deserves to be treated fairly," I said, my voice low. "And if that means saying no to being taken advantage of, then that's exactly what I'll teach him." Kyle opened his mouth to argue again, but I shut the door before he could get another word out. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the group text messages. "Mom, Ben, just bring the gifts back. Your nephews are crying. This isn't about you. Kyle, you're a jerk for doing this. You ruined the day. Dad, be the bigger person, son." I stared at those messages until the words blurred. Not one of them asked how Max felt. Not one of them even acknowledged that he had been humiliated, that he had sat there holding a dollar store whistle while his cousins got everything they wanted. Max finally spoke, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "Dad, was I bad this year?" It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I knelt next to him, gripping his shoulders. "No, you were amazing this year. This isn't about you doing anything wrong. This is about people being unfair, okay?" He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite believe me. By late afternoon, the messages had shifted from guilt-tripping to outright threats. "Kyle, you think you can just keep those gifts? That's stealing. Mom, you're embarrassing the family. Everyone is upset. Kyle, if you don't bring them back, we're done. Don't bother coming tomorrow." Tomorrow was supposed to be the big family dinner. Prime rib, homemade pies, the works. Max had been looking forward to it for weeks. I just texted back, "Then we won't be there." That was apparently the final straw. The phone rang again. This time it was Dad. I answered because if I didn't, he'd just keep calling. Then he said, without preamble, his voice clipped, "You're going to return those gifts right now." "I'm not," I said. "This isn't how we handle things in this family." I almost laughed. "How we handle things? You mean how we sweep everything under the rug and pretend it's fine until it happens again next year?" "Your brother is having a hard time," Dad said, his tone softening slightly, like I was supposed to pity him. "He's under a lot of stress financially." I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Is that why he went skiing last month?" There was a pause. "That's none of your business." "Funny," I shot back, "because apparently it's everyone's business what I do with my money." "Ben," Dad said in that weary, disappointed tone he had perfected over the years, "you're being petty." And just like that, the conversation was over. The rest of the evening was quiet, but not peaceful. Max stayed close to me, quiet but watchful, like he was waiting for me to blow up. I didn't. I made us grilled cheese sandwiches, put on a movie, and tried to pretend it was just another night. But my phone kept lighting up on the counter. More messages, cousins, aunts, even grandma chiming in. Ben, don't punish the kids. Maybe just bring back one of the gifts. You're acting like a child. Not a single person mentioned Max. Not a single person asked what he had gotten. It was like he didn't exist to them unless I was buying him matching pajamas for the family photo. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Max sitting under that tree, holding that whistle, trying not to look disappointed. I thought about all the years I'd been bending over backward to make Christmas magical for everyone, even when money was tight for me. The time I picked up the slack when Kyle forgot to buy anything at all. The year I paid for half of Christmas dinner because Mom said she couldn't afford the ham. And still, somehow, I was the villain now. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Mom. Dinner is still at 4 o'clock. Please come, but leave the drama at home. I stared at it for a long time. Drama. That was what she called standing up for my son. By noon, the group chat had exploded again. Kyle posted a photo of his kids sitting sadly by the empty tree, the same one I'd taken a picture of yesterday, with the caption, "Thanks, Uncle Ben." Family members were commenting with sad emojis and poor boys. I realized then that this wasn't going to blow over. If anything, it was getting worse. Kyle was spinning the story to make me look like some kind of Grinch, and everyone was eating it up. Max was sitting at the table drawing when he looked up and asked, "Are we going to Grandma's?" I hesitated. I could already imagine what would happen if we walked in there. The looks, the whispers, the way Kyle would smirk like he'd won. But before I could answer, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a pounding. It was a slow, deliberate knock, like whoever was out there wasn't in a rush. When I opened it, Kyle was standing there again, but this time he wasn't yelling. He was smiling, and that somehow was worse. Kyle stood there on my porch with that fake, calm smile, like he just dropped by for coffee. His hands were shoved into his jacket pockets, and he tilted his head like he was the reasonable one in this situation. "Hey man," he said lightly, almost too lightly. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part of me, the part that still clung to the idea that maybe we could fix this, stepped aside and let him in. Max was still at the kitchen table, head bent over his drawing, but I could see his eyes flicking up to watch us carefully. Kyle leaned against the counter like he owned the place, letting out a little chuckle. "Look, yesterday got heated. I think we can both admit that." "Sure," I said flatly. "And you know, Christmas is supposed to be about forgiveness, right? About family." He spread his hands like he was the peacekeeper here. I crossed my arms. "Say what you came to say, Kyle." His grin widened just a little, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Okay," he said casually. "So here's the deal. I talked to Mom and Dad this morning, and we all agreed. You can bring the gifts back, and we'll forget this ever happened. Water under the bridge." I just stared at him. "That's not happening." The smile slipped just a fraction. "Ben, be reasonable. My kids are heartbroken, and my son was humiliated." I shot back. Kyle sighed like I was being dramatic again. "You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. It was a misunderstanding." "No," I said, my voice harder now. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was you not holding up your end of a deal." Again, his eyes narrowed just slightly. "Fine, if that's how you want to play it." He pulled out his phone and tapped something on the screen. A second later, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up and saw what he'd sent, a screenshot of a post on Facebook. My heart dropped. It was my picture, the one I had taken yesterday of the empty tree. Except now it had been shared in our family Facebook group with Kyle's caption plastered over it. "Thanks to my brother, my kid's Christmas morning looked like this. He took every single gift back because he didn't think we did enough for his son." I guess some people care more about money than family. In the comments, there were already dozens. "Oh, those poor boys. Wow, Ben, really? Couldn't you just let it go for one day? This is so sad. Those kids didn't deserve this." Every single one of them assuming I was the villain. Not a single person asking why I'd done it. Kyle watched my face and smiled like he was satisfied with my reaction. "People deserve to know the kind of stunt you pulled," he said smoothly. "That's not what happened, and you know it." "Doesn't matter," he said with a shrug. "That's what they believe. You want to be stubborn? Go ahead. Just know you're the one tearing this family apart." It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Max slid off his chair and came to stand beside me, clutching my hand. "Dad," he whispered, his voice small. I looked down at him and then back at Kyle. You need to leave, I said. Not until we work this out. There's nothing to work out. I snapped louder this time. You broke the deal. You humiliated my son. And now you're trying to turn everyone against me for calling you out on it. So get out of my house. Kyle's smile finally faltered. You really want to do this? Make me the bad guy. You did that yourself, I said coldly. For a second, I thought he might actually argue, but then he just shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked out, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing. Max tugged on my sleeve. Dad, everyone thinks you're mean. I knelt down, so we were eye level. I know, buddy, but you know the truth, and I know the truth. That's what matters right now. He nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. By mid-afternoon, things had somehow gotten worse. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, voicemails, even a few emails from relatives I barely spoke to. Word had spread beyond just our immediate family. People I hadn't seen in years were chiming in, offering unsolicited advice about forgiveness and family unity. Then came the kicker. Mom called again. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Ben, she said, her voice tight. I just want you to know that we're still having dinner tonight, but we're not going to let this ruin the day for everyone else. Kyle and his family will be there, and I expect you to apologize when you walk in. I actually laughed, short and humorless. Apologize for what? For keeping my word when Kyle didn't keep his? For making a scene, she snapped. For hurting your nephews. What about Max? I asked, my voice cracking just a little. What about what they did to him? There was a pause, and then she said, he'll get over it. Something in me went ice cold. He'll get over it. I repeated. Ben, Mom said, her tone softening, he's a kid. They don't remember this stuff. That was when I realized we weren't just dealing with Kyle's selfishness. This was bigger. This was the entire family deciding that my kids' feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. Max had gone back to drawing, humming under his breath like nothing had happened. But I could feel this heavy weight settling on my chest. At 4 o'clock sharp, I got another text from Dad. If you're coming to dinner, be polite. Don't bring this up again. Let it go. I didn't reply. I didn't tell Max to get ready either. Instead, I sat there waiting because I knew in my gut this wasn't over yet. And I was right. Around 5:30, another car pulled into my driveway. This time, it wasn't just Kyle. It was my parents. And they weren't smiling. When I saw my parents get out of the car, my first instinct was to tell Max to go to his room. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because I didn't want him to hear whatever was about to happen. He didn't argue. He just grabbed his drawing and padded down the hall, closing his door softly behind him. By the time I opened the front door, Mom and Dad were already halfway up the steps. Mom's face was pinched and tight, the way it always got when she thought I was acting out. Dad looked like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. Calm, serious, the voice of authority. Ben, Mom said before I could even get a word out. This has gone far enough. I crossed my arms. I told you we weren't coming to dinner. That's exactly why we're here, Dad said, his tone low and controlled. You can't just sit here sulking while the whole family is trying to have a nice evening. You need to fix this. I felt my jaw tighten. Fix what exactly? Kyle broke the deal. My son got a plastic whistle while I spent almost $2,000 on his kids. And somehow I'm the one who needs to fix it. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. You're making this all about money, she said sharply. Christmas isn't about gifts. It's about family. And right now, you're tearing this family apart over a few toys. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. A few toys? Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about the gifts, Mom. This is about respect. About my son being treated like he matters. Mom rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Dad stepped forward then, his voice softer, but somehow more cutting. Son, you need to let this go. You're embarrassing yourself. There it was again. That word, embarrassing. Petty. Dramatic. Somehow, standing up for my kid was always framed as a character flaw. I could feel the anger boiling under my skin, but I swallowed it down. Losing my temper would just prove their point. We're not coming to dinner, I said evenly. That's my final answer. Mom's face darkened. Then don't bother coming tomorrow either, she snapped. Or next week, or New Year's. If you're going to hold this grudge, maybe it's better if you stay away until you can be civil. Something in my chest twisted. It wasn't that I loved family dinners. Half the time I left them feeling more drained than when I arrived. But hearing her say that, hearing her so casually threaten to cut us out, hit harder than I expected. You're really okay with not seeing your grandson? I asked quietly. Mom didn't even flinch. That's up to you. I just nodded once then. I guess that's it. They stood there for a moment, maybe expecting me to back down, to cave the way I always had before. When I didn't, Dad sighed like I had disappointed him personally and turned back toward the car. Mom followed, muttering under her breath about how stubborn I was. I closed the door, locked it, and just stood there for a long time, my forehead resting against the wood. The house felt painfully quiet. I finally went to check on Max. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed, his drawing abandoned beside him, staring at the floor. When he looked up at me, his eyes were big and wet, but he wasn't crying. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? He asked softly. My throat felt tight. They're just upset right now, I said carefully. But that's not your fault. None of this is your fault. He nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. I sat down beside him, and for a while, we just sat there in silence. I wanted to tell him everything. How unfair it was. How tired I was of always being the one to compromise. But he was just a kid. He didn't need my anger on top of his own disappointment. That night after Max finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room staring at the glow of the Christmas tree we'd set up in our own house. The gifts I'd taken back were piled neatly in the corner, still wrapped. I'd meant what I said when I told Kyle the deal was off, but now I wasn't sure what to do with them. Return them? Donate them? Give them to Max? Everywhere I turned, I felt trapped. If I returned them, I'd be out the money and my nephews would still think I was the villain. If I gave them to the boys later, it would look like I'd caved. And then there was Max. I couldn't let him think this was normal. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from one of my aunts, someone I hadn't talked to in months. I heard what happened. You need to apologize, Ben. Family is all we have. I stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone face down on the table. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was about years of being expected to shoulder the responsibility for keeping the family happy. I was the one who always brought the extra side dish. The one who always offered to help clean up. The one who quietly paid for things when someone else forgot their wallet. And every time I did it, I told myself it was for Max, so he could grow up feeling like he had a big, loving family around him. But sitting there in the quiet, I realized something. All that effort hadn't made them love him more. It had just taught them that they could take from us without giving anything back. That thought hurt more than anything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there staring at the gifts, running through every memory of the past few years, every slight, and every ignored birthday. Every time I'd been told I was too sensitive or overreacting. By morning, I knew one thing. I was done playing the role they'd written for me. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet. But for the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me because I realized that I didn't have to keep showing up just to be treated like an afterthought. I didn't have to teach Max to accept that either. That morning, instead of getting ready for another tense round of holiday drama, I made pancakes. We ate breakfast together with Christmas music playing softly in the background. Max laughed when I flipped one wrong and it landed half on the counter. For a moment, it almost felt like we had shaken off the weight of everything. But then my phone buzzed again. Kyle had posted another photo, this time of him and his kids at dinner, surrounded by relatives, all smiling and holding up their presents. The caption read, "Some people try to ruin Christmas, but we still made it great. Family first." And just like that, the calm turned into something else. Not anger, exactly. Resolve. I didn't respond to Kyle's post. Not a single word. In fact, I muted the family group chat entirely that morning. No more alerts. No more guilt-tripping notifications lighting up my phone like an alarm bell. The silence was strangely liberating. Max and I spent the rest of the holidays doing our own thing. We went ice skating at the local rink, just the two of us. We grabbed pizza and watched a marathon of his favorite superhero movies. We even baked cookies from scratch, though half of them came out burnt. And we laughed so hard we almost cried. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I started to realize something. It felt good. It felt good not bending over backward for everyone else. It felt good not rushing around trying to meet everyone's expectations, just focusing on my kid and our own happiness. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for years. But it wasn't just emotional. With all the time and money I wasn't spending on smoothing things over with the family, I had bandwidth for other things I'd been putting off. That week, I finally updated my resume and applied for a promotion at work that I'd been too nervous to go for. It was a long shot, a management position overseeing a team twice the size of mine, but I figured, why not? To my surprise, my boss called me into his office 2 days later. "Ben," he said, glancing at the papers in front of him, "I have to say, I'm impressed. Your numbers are consistently among the best in the department. You've been taking on extra projects for months, and you've been mentoring the new hires without being asked. We've noticed." I tried to play it cool, but my heart was pounding. "You're one of the top candidates," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The final decision will be made next week, but I'd start thinking about who you'd want on your team." I left that office feeling 10 feet tall. That night, Max and I went out for burgers to celebrate. He grinned at me across the table, ketchup on his cheek, and said, "Dad, you're smiling more now." It stopped me in my tracks. "Yeah," I said, pretending to be casual. "Yeah," he nodded seriously. "You used to look tired all the time." That hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I had been tired, bone-deep tired, from constantly giving more than I got, from fighting battles that no one even acknowledged. But now, for the first time, I felt like I was taking my life back. The next morning, I started making quiet changes. I called the bike shop where I'd bought my nephew's new bikes and explained the situation. The owner, a kind older guy who'd seen everything, gave me store credit for the full amount. "Better they go to someone who appreciates them," he said with a wink. With that credit, I bought Max the mountain bike he'd been dreaming about for months. When I wheeled it into the living room, his jaw dropped. "For me?" he asked like he couldn't believe it. "For you," I said, ruffling his hair. He was outside riding it within 10 minutes, whooping with joy as he tore up and down the driveway. The sound of his laughter was like medicine. Word must have gotten back to the family, maybe through one of the cousins who stalked my social media, because a few days later, Kyle sent me a curt text. "Real classy. Ben, buying your kid a new bike." Just to rub it in. I stared at it for a second and then deleted it without replying. I didn't need his approval anymore. As the new year rolled in, I leaned harder into this new way of living. I started taking better care of myself, eating real meals instead of scarfing down whatever was left after Max ate, going for runs in the morning, even joining a gym. And with every little thing I did for myself, the anger I'd been carrying started to shift into something else. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet. But clarity. I started to see the family patterns for what they were. Cycles that repeated year after year because no one dared break them. Kyle would drop the ball. Mom would excuse it. Dad would tell me to be the bigger person. And I would cave, teaching everyone that it was okay to keep doing it. Not this time. For the first time, I wasn't rushing to patch things up. I wasn't scrambling to make the family whole again. I was letting the fracture sit there. And that was when I realized something powerful. The world didn't fall apart just because I stopped holding it up. If anything, my own little world, the one that actually mattered, was stronger than ever. Then the promotion came through. When HR called to make it official, I almost didn't believe them. Not only had I gotten the job, but the raise that came with it was bigger than I'd imagined. Enough that I could finally start a college fund for Max. Enough that we could take a real vacation that summer, just the two of us. When I told Max, he threw his arms around me and shouted, "We should go to the beach." So, we planned it just like that. No group texts, no asking if the dates worked for anyone else. Just me and my son deciding what we wanted and doing it. Meanwhile, the family kept trying to bait me back in. There were texts about birthday parties, about a cousin's baby shower, even about an intervention dinner where we could all talk this out. I didn't go, and the more I stayed away, the clearer everything became. I started hearing things, little bits of gossip that made their way to me through mutual friends. How Kyle had been complaining that without me around, he had to buy all his own groceries for family dinners now. How Mom had been griping that she had to host Easter without my help this year. And it just wasn't the same. A small, grim satisfaction settled in my chest every time I heard it. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because it meant they were finally feeling the gap I'd left. And somewhere deep down, I started to wonder if maybe this wasn't just about drawing boundaries anymore. Maybe it was about teaching them a lesson they wouldn't forget. The kind of lesson that would make them think twice before ever treating Max or me like an afterthought again. By spring, I was in the best shape I'd been in years, in a better job, and in a stronger place mentally. I had new routines, new confidence, and a new sense of control, which meant when the family came knocking again, this time about a big summer reunion they were planning, I was ready and calm. Because for the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was thinking ahead, and I had an idea. When the text about the summer reunion came through, I almost ignored it like I had all the others. But this one was different. It wasn't just another casual invite. It was a full event announcement with dates, a location, and even a spreadsheet link with who's bringing what. The reunion was going to be big. Cousins flying in from out of state, rented cabins near the lake, a whole weekend of barbecues, campfires, and family bonding. Normally, I'd have been the one coordinating half of it, organizing meals, making sure everyone had enough bedding. But this time, I wasn't asked to plan anything, just to bring dessert. That alone was telling. At first, I thought about declining, but then I remembered what I'd been telling myself for months. No more caving, no more appeasing. And part of me realized that if I didn't go, I'd just be leaving the narrative in their hands, letting them keep painting me as the bitter one, the difficult one, the Grinch. If I was going to reclaim the story, I'd have to show up on my own terms. So I texted back, short and simple, "Max and I will be there." And then I started planning. The first thing I did was look closer at that spreadsheet link they'd sent. It wasn't locked. Anyone with the link could edit it, which meant I could see not just what everyone was bringing, but who was paying for what, who had reserved which cabin, even which family members were splitting costs. And that's when I noticed something that made my eyebrows go up. Kyle had booked the largest cabin, the one right on the lake with the private fire pit, but he hadn't paid the deposit yet. In fact, the spreadsheet still showed a big, glaring pending in red next to his name. The note said payment was due in 2 weeks. Interesting. A couple of quiet conversations with people I trusted, my cousin Mark, who had no patience for Kyle's antics, revealed even more. Apparently, Kyle had been bragging about how he was getting a deal on the cabin because Mom and Dad were covering part of it as a thank you for all the work he'd done helping organize the reunion. Helping organize? I nearly laughed out loud. Kyle hadn't organized a thing in his life. But that was when an idea started to form. At work, I just finished a leadership course about negotiating and influencing. One of the biggest takeaways had been, use the power you have, not the power you wish you had. And right now, I had 2 things I hadn't had before, financial breathing room and leverage. Over the next few days, I quietly reached out to the owner of the rental cabins, a local guy named Rick, who answered his own phone. I explained that I was part of the reunion group and asked about availability. As it turned out, the big lakefront cabin Kyle had claimed was the last one of its size available for that weekend. So, if someone doesn't pay the deposit? I asked carefully. Rick chuckled. Then it goes back on the market. First come, first served. Good to know, I said, my mind already turning. I didn't book anything yet. I wasn't going to be reckless. But I marked the payment deadline on my calendar and started watching the spreadsheet like a hawk. Meanwhile, life kept getting better in other areas. My new team at work was thriving under my leadership, and I was starting to get noticed at higher levels of the company. Max was doing great in school and had joined a local soccer team, which meant we were spending our Saturdays at games, cheering until we were hoarse. It was a good season, but I never forgot what had happened. And every time I saw Kyle's smug posts about how family is everything, or Mom's passive-aggressive memes about forgiveness, it reminded me why I was waiting, why I was planning. About a week before the cabin payment was due, Kyle texted me out of the blue. Hey man, you're still bringing dessert, right? Don't cheap out this time, LOL. The nerve. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Rick back and asked about the cabin again. Still available? I asked. Yep, he said, still pending payment. Great, I said, my voice calm. Put me down for it. I paid the full deposit over the phone, got the confirmation email, and quietly waited. 2 days later, the spreadsheet updated. The red pending next to Kyle's name had been replaced with a bright yellow booking lost. And right below it, in green, was my name. The group chat blew up almost immediately. Wait, what happened to the lake cabin? Ben, did you book this? Kyle, did you forget to pay again? Kyle's response came quickly, full of fury. What the heck, Ben? That was our cabin. I typed back, calm as ever. It wasn't paid for. I booked it so Max and I would have a place to stay. See you at the lake. There was a flurry of angry emojis and accusations, but I didn't take the bait. I just let them rage while I pictured Kyle pacing his kitchen, trying to figure out what to do. The other cabins were already full, which meant he'd have to find lodging somewhere off-site or cancel. And that was just step one. Over the next week, I made sure everything for the reunion weekend was handled perfectly on my end. Max and I got matching new swim gear, packed our favorite snacks, and even bought a small fire pit grill for Esmores. If Kyle thought I was going to show up sulking, he had another thing coming. The day before the reunion, I got a text from my cousin Mark. "Just so you know, Kyle's been telling everyone you stole the cabin on purpose to humiliate him." I smiled at my phone. "Good," I texted back, because humiliation wasn't even the half of what I had planned. The day of the reunion dawned bright and warm, the kind of summer morning that smells like sunscreen and lake water. Max was practically vibrating with excitement as we packed up the truck. The cabin confirmation had felt like winning a battle, but this weekend was the war. I told myself over and over that this wasn't about getting even. It was about setting the record straight, about showing my son and everyone else that we weren't doormats. When we arrived at the lake, I almost laughed at how perfect the timing was. The cabins were clustered close enough that you couldn't miss each other coming and going. Kyle and his family had just pulled up and were unloading their car. Except instead of heading to the lakefront cabin they'd been bragging about, they were dragging suitcases toward one of the small, overflow cottages way in the back. The kind usually rented to last-minute guests or fishermen passing through. Kyle saw me get out of the truck and his face went red instantly. "Wow," he said loudly, loud enough for half the family to hear. "Look who decided to show up after months of sulking." I smiled pleasantly. "Hey, Kyle, glad you made it." He opened his mouth to say something else, probably something cutting, but I just walked past him, Max at my side, and unlocked the door to the big lakefront cabin. The look on Kyle's face when he realized exactly where we were staying was priceless. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. Inside, the cabin was perfect. Big windows overlooking the water, a stone fireplace, enough room for Max to run around and explore. As we unpacked, I noticed that my hands weren't shaking. Months ago, I'd have been bracing for confrontation, dreading the inevitable drama. But now, I felt strangely calm. That evening was the big family cookout. Everyone gathered near the lake, kids splashing in the shallows, aunts and uncles setting up folding chairs. When Max and I walked down with our cooler, heads turned. Conversations quieted just slightly, the kind of quiet that comes when people are sizing you up. I smiled, nodded politely, and started unloading our things like nothing was wrong. Kyle, of course, couldn't help himself. "So," he said loudly again, making sure everyone could hear, "you really thought it was okay to steal our cabin?" I glanced at him calm. "It wasn't your cabin, Kyle. You didn't pay for it." His wife jumped in, her arms crossed, "Because we were waiting for Mom and Dad to send their part." "You knew that?" I tilted my head. "I knew there was a deadline, and I knew it was going to expire. That's why I paid for it. Simple as that." There was a murmur from some of the cousins, half in agreement, half uncomfortable. Kyle's face was red now. "You did this to humiliate me." I shrugged. "No, I did it to make sure Max and I had a place to stay." And then, because I'd been waiting for this moment for months, I added, "And because maybe it's time someone in this family learned to follow through on their commitments." That was when Dad spoke up from his chair. "Ben, let's not start." "No," I said, my voice steady. "Let's. Because for years, I've been the one holding this family together. I've been the one buying extra gifts, covering for people when they forget, paying for dinners when someone forgets their wallet. And every time I said something, I was told to let it go, to be the bigger person. Well, I am done being the bigger person when it just means being walked on." The entire group was silent now. Even the kids stopped splashing. Kyle laughed bitterly. "Wow. So this is what it's about. Some Christmas presents." "This is about respect," I said sharply. "It's about my son sitting under that tree holding a plastic whistle while you sat there smiling. And when I stood up for him, you turned the entire family against me. You made posts online calling me selfish. You told everyone I ruined Christmas. And not one of you stopped to ask what Max got that morning." I turned, looking at everyone now. Mom, Dad, the cousins, all of them. "Do any of you even know what he got?" No one answered. "A whistle," I said flatly. "That's it. A whistle. And you all told me I was overreacting, that he would get over it." Mom shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not here to fight. I said, finally, softer now. I'm here to enjoy the weekend with my son. But make no mistake, we are done being the afterthought. We are done being the ones who give and get nothing back. I sat back down calmly, opened a soda, and passed one to Max like nothing had happened. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then Mark, bless him, cleared his throat and said, honestly, Ben's right. We've all let Kyle skate by for years. Maybe this was overdue. The spell broke then. A few other cousins nodded. Someone even clapped me on the shoulder as they walked by, murmuring, good for you, man. Kyle looked like he was about to explode. He muttered something under his breath and stalked off toward the cottages, his wife trailing behind him. The rest of the evening was surprisingly pleasant. Conversations shifted. Kids went back to playing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was just another member of the family, not the designated scapegoat or fixer. But the real payoff came later that night, around 10 p.m., after the campfire had burned low and most of the family had gone to bed. I saw Kyle stomping back toward the lakefront cabin. I braced myself, but instead of yelling, he just stood at the edge of the porch, his face red, his hands clenched. You made me look bad, he said quietly, his voice shaking. No, I said, standing up and meeting his eyes. You did that yourself. He didn't have a comeback for that. After a long moment, he turned and walked away. Max came out onto the porch then, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Everything okay? I smiled down at him. Yeah, buddy. Everything's okay. And for the first time, I really meant it. The next morning, the lake was glassy and still, reflecting the pale pink sunrise. Max was already outside on his new bike, riding lazy loops around the cabin's driveway. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, breathing in the quiet. It didn't last. Around 8, Kyle's wife stormed up the path, her face pinched and tight. We're leaving, she announced, not bothering with a hello. I just nodded. Okay. She looked thrown by my calmness. You don't even care? Of course I care, I said mildly. I hope you all have a safe trip. She opened her mouth, probably to unleash whatever lecture she had loaded, but Kyle appeared behind her and grabbed her arm. Forget it, he muttered. Let's just go. And just like that, they left. By the time everyone else woke up, the little back cottage was empty. No kids running around. No Kyle making sarcastic jokes. No simmering tension hanging in the air. The whole atmosphere shifted, lighter, easier, like someone had turned down a noise you didn't realize had been blaring. Throughout the day, aunts and uncles kept stopping by our cabin. You really said what needed to be said last night, one of my uncles told me as we grilled burgers for lunch. We've been biting our tongues about Kyle for years, another cousin admitted. Honestly, we always felt bad for Max. He got overlooked a lot. Good on you for finally calling it out. It was strange. The same family who had been silent at Christmas was now quietly coming around, acknowledging what I'd known all along. This wasn't a one-time issue. This was a pattern. Even Mom approached me that afternoon, wringing her hands like she didn't know where to start. Ben, she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. I think I owe you an apology. I stayed quiet, waiting. I shouldn't have said Max would get over it, she admitted. That wasn't fair. You were right. What happened wasn't okay. And we should have asked how he felt before jumping on you. Something loosened in my chest. Thank you, I said simply. She hesitated. I just don't know how to fix things with Kyle. He's furious. That's his choice, I said, not unkindly. All I can do is make sure my son knows I've got his back. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and I realized she was genuinely trying, maybe for the first time. That evening, we had another campfire, and this time, the laughter felt easy. Max sat between me and Mark, roasting marshmallows until they caught fire, then waving them around like torches. When he finally crawled into my lap, sticky and smelling like smoke, he whispered, Dad, this is the best trip ever. And just like that, everything felt worth it. The next morning, before we left, I noticed something on the spreadsheet. Kyle had removed his name from all future family events. Not just the reunion, but Thanksgiving, Christmas, even the annual 4th of July barbecue. For a moment, I wondered if I should feel guilty. But then I thought about Max's face that Christmas morning, holding that whistle, and the way Kyle had smiled like it was nothing. No, this was the natural consequence of years of taking without giving. On the drive home, Max was chattering about all the things he wanted to do at the lake next year. Do you think we'll get the same cabin again? He asked eagerly. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and smiled. I think we'll get whatever cabin we want. Because the truth was, I'd already called Rick before we left and put down the deposit for next summer for the same lakefront cabin. This time, no one could take it away. When we pulled into our driveway, Max hopped out of the truck, ran straight to his bike, and started circling the yard again. I stood there watching him, feeling lighter than I had in a long, long time. No guilt, no anger, just clarity. We had finally drawn the line, and this time, we weren't stepping back. I snapped a picture of Max riding under the afternoon sun, his hair wild and his smile wide, and sent it to the family group chat with a single message: "We're doing just fine." And then I muted the chat again, for good. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy Reddit tales, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. And hey, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in this situation.